But it was all a lie. The makeup was fresh, the costumes were vibrant, and the poster claimed the return of KISS. But look closer. The truth of the 1979 Dynasty era is one of the darkest secrets in the band's history. It wasn't a return. It was a cover-up. A multi-million-dollar distraction designed to hide a band that had already shattered. Welcome back to the channel. Today, we aren't just looking at a tour, we're dissecting a disaster. By 1979, the machinery of KISS was bigger than ever, but the engine was broken. 4 solo albums, 4 separate egos, and suddenly everywhere you looked, KISS were lunchboxes, belt buckles, and comic books. For some fans, this wasn't rock rebellion anymore. This was the moment KISS officially sold out. So they regrouped. They put on these new, colourful costumes, specifically colour-coded to sell merchandise, and they announced a massive tour. But behind the scenes? The betrayal had already started in the studio. We're going to dive into the ghost drumming scandal, the sheer arrogance of the laser curtain stage show, and the humiliation of playing to empty seats in the heart of America. This is the story of the Dynasty deception. It starts with the sound. When you drop the needle on Dynasty, you hear a polished pop rock sound. Disco-infused, radio-friendly. But listen to the drums. Peter Criss was the Catman, the heart of the band's street-level grit. But by '79, his hands and his head weren't in the game. A car accident, substance abuse. The specifics are messy, but the result was clear. Producer Vinnie Poncia didn't trust him. So Gene and Paul made a choice, a cold business decision. They brought in Anton Fig, a session pro, a mercenary. Peter only plays on one song, Dirty Livin'. That's it. For the rest of the record, he was ghosted, replaced. Imagine the humiliation. You're a founding member of the biggest band in the world. You show up to the studio and they tell you, "Go home, Peter. We've got this." And the worst part? The fans didn't know. We bought the record. We looked at the cover. We thought it was the 4 of them, but it was a fabrication, a sonic lie sold to millions. Then came the music itself. I Was Made for Lovin' You. Now, looking back, it's a hit. It's iconic. But in 1979, to the die-hard fans in the denim jackets, this was treason. This was KISS chasing the Bee Gees. Paul Stanley wanted a hit. He wanted to prove he could write a disco song better than the disco artists. And he did, but at what cost? It alienated the base. You have to understand the climate. This was the era of disco sucks rallies. And here comes the Demon and the Star Child, trading heavy metal thunder for a pulsating dance beat. The only thing saving the credibility was Ace. Ace Frehley was the reluctant hero of Dynasty. While Gene was distracted by Hollywood and Peter was being erased, Ace delivered 2,000 Man. He delivered Hard Times. Ace was the only one keeping the rock and roll spirit alive on that vinyl. But even he knew the ship was taking on water. So the album is out. It's controversial. Now they have to sell it on the road. And typical KISS fashion, they decided to go bigger than ever. Enter the Return of KISS tour. They scrapped the old stage. They built something that looked like a spaceship crash-landed in an arena. But the centerpiece? The laser curtain. This wasn't just a light show. This was dangerous. A cone of green laser light that would encase Gene Simmons during his bass solo. It cost a fortune. But here's the irony. The technology was temperamental. It required massive power. It required precision. And half the time, it didn't work right. Or worse, the venue couldn't handle it. It became a symbol of the whole tour. Expensive, flashy, but ultimately a headache. They were trying to distract the audience with lasers, so we wouldn't notice the band was falling apart. They were hiding behind the technology. But the universe has a way of humbling even the biggest rock stars. 1979 wasn't just a bad year for KISS internal politics. It was a bad year for America. The energy crisis. Gas lines stretched for blocks. People couldn't afford to fill up their tanks just to drive 2 hours to a concert. And KISS had booked a massive tour relying on kids travelling from the suburbs. Then came the visual that haunts Gene Simmons to this day. Toledo, they walk out on stage. The pyro goes off, the lights hit, and the arena is half empty. For a band that prided itself on selling out Madison Square Garden in minutes, this was a punch to the gut. The promoters had overreached, the economy was tanking, and the fans, they were tired of the toys, they were tired of the lunchboxes. They wanted a rock band, and they got a circus. You can see the tension in the footage from that year. Look at the famous Tom Snyder interview. It's hilarious, sure. Ace is drunk, charming, and hijacking the show. But look at Gene, look at Paul. They are seething. They were trying so hard to present this sanitized, family-friendly image. They wanted to be superheroes. They wanted to be Disney characters. And here was Ace, reminding everyone that they were just 4 guys from New York, one of whom was completely wasted. On stage, the dynamic was shifting. Paul Stanley was working overtime. He was sweating, dancing, flying through the air, trying to compensate for the lack of energy behind the drum kit. Because remember, Peter Criss was still on tour, but he wasn't really there. The performances were erratic. Some nights, Peter would slow the tempos down to a crawl. It was a subtle form of sabotage. You could see Gene turning around, glaring at the drum riser, trying to lock in with a drummer who was playing his own song. By the end of the tour, they weren't travelling together. They weren't talking. They were 4 separate corporations meeting on stage for 2 hours to collect a paycheck. The Dynasty was crumbling. The final show of the tour marked the end of an era. It was the last time the original 4 would tour together for nearly 2 decades. They tried to hide it with session musicians. They tried to hide it with lasers. They tried to hide it with colourful costumes. But the fans knew the 1979 tour wasn't a victory lap. It was a funeral procession in platform boots. If you enjoyed this deep dive, hit that like button. Next time, we're going even darker. We're looking at Unmasked and the final exit of the Catman. You don't want to miss that. Imagine the humiliation,